Sorry about that brief interruption. I wasn't expecting the battery to go down by 15% in 20 minutes. Um, part 4, well, part 3 actually, unexpectedly part 3 of the review of the Kraftwerk 2020 coloured vinyl reissues and a tour of their overall discography. 1990, the band came back to playing live after a 9-year break, and the lineup had changed considerably. Wolfgang Flür had left, and he was replaced by Fritz Hilpert. Now, Fritz was, I think, a studio engineer who'd worked with the band on a couple of previous albums, though he wasn't in the credits of those. But he replaced Wolfgang. He played drums live, and Karl Bartos was still in the band at that point. And then Karl Bartos left the group in late 1990, early 1991, just on the eve of the release of their next album, The Mix. And again, The Mix is an album that they've changed a few things around. But there's something I want to bring up actually about Electric Cafe, which I haven't mentioned before. Okay, and this is something that really annoys me. If you look at the track listing for that, that's a 2009 edition. The telephone call. There's an extra song on this album now called House Phone, and House Phone is the B-side of the 12-inch of the telephone call. And House Phone is a really dull track, to be honest. It's just a bunch of effects and sound noises and sound effects over a drum track. It's extremely dull. And what they've done is actually they've replaced the LP recording of the telephone call with a 7-inch mix, and with then also the B-side, the House Phone track. I hate this replacement. If you're going to replace telephone call, replace it with a 12-inch mix of telephone call, and don't put the dub B-side on there as well to try and pad out the LP. It's really daft, and it makes the album a far less effective piece of work. So to me, Electric Cafe is the best Kraftwerk album, and Technopop's the worst, which is odd because there's only about 8 minutes of music that's changed between the two. But between that and changing the concept of the album, it really pisses me off. Again, as I've said, the 2004 digital remaster contains the full remastered version of the telephone call LP mix and LP recording. That's the way it should always have been. I know that's not the way it is, but that's the way I always wish it had been. And if you want to get a remaster of the LP mix of Telephone Call, you have to get a copy of the 2004 remaster, or you have to find a streaming copy somewhere or a downloadable version of it. And so, the next single, 1991, The Robots. Again, the band were still doing multilingual versions of the songs. So the German version of the mix here is in the main different recordings of the tracks. There's Music Non-Stop is the same version, but aside from that, I think maybe Autobahn is the same, but the other songs that are on the mix are new and alternate recordings on the German language version. The mix is a live in the studio stroke greatest hits stroke best of the band presenting rearranged versions of their best known songs using new studio technology. So they transferred their recording technology from an analog keyboard setup to a digital platform. They transferred a lot of the original sounds back in, and really the mix is a live in the studio version using all the new equipment. I think it really annoyed a lot of people at the time it came out because they wanted new Kraftwerk songs and they couldn't get new Kraftwerk songs. But what it did do was that it allowed the Kraftwerk live sound to be represented, and Kraftwerk live are very different from Kraftwerk in the studio. I'm just going to mention there's a 12-inch single here of the Robots. Now, the Robots has about 3 or 4 different recordings from the mix era. Now, primarily there's the standard LP mix of it, which was then edited down to be a 7-inch single. There's a B-side version called Robotronic. There's also a version on a CD single called Robotnik. So those are 3 separate versions, and if you want to hear all the recordings that the band have made of all the different interpretations of the song, different arrangements, different sonic structures, different use of technology. Get this CD single if you can. It's an essential part of the Kraftwerk puzzle, I think. So, with that in mind, we go back to the mix, and here we have the German and the UK edition of the albums. Same back covers, same front covers, same inner booklets, all exactly the same apart from the names of the songs that we've got on there. But what we do have, and you will notice this, is two different covers, two different versions. So the 1991 album has a different cover, different image. That's from the front of the Robot single. Let's quickly take this out here. Again, gatefold. And what you will probably notice there is that that actually features 4 robots, although Karl Bartos had left and hadn't been replaced at that point, so they've actually doubled up one of the robots twice. The inner sleeve, classic t-shirt, you may have seen me wearing it in a previous episode there, and a t-shirt that tells you it's the classic works. That is debatable. So there's also an alternate cover, which is a black and white version as opposed to the white on black version. This version is the 2004 remaster. No mucking about with that. The same songs and performances as it was on the original. So the mix 2020 coloured vinyl version. Here we go. First and foremost, classic robot graphic. Made a very big selling t-shirt. The vinyl discs are both represented by white vinyl here. Again, if you want to make sure, check the inner sleeves, make sure that the titles are in German, and the other disc is there. Also, not entirely coincidentally, Ralph Florian. At this point, Kraftwerk had very clearly moved from being a 4-piece group into a group of 2 people that were, being seen as the main kind of, creative entities that were running the band. There's a booklet inside the 2020 version. Lots of previously unpublished, or more correctly, officially unpublished photographs of the robots at the Dusseldorf studio. Looks like they haven't changed the soundproofing in the past 13 years. There's Ralph Bott. There's the 4-piece version of the band. Again, with the doubled up head. That's at a slightly different angle. I think, let's check. So that's Robot Fritz Bott, I think is the word we're looking for. Ralph Bott, and this is the only picture that contains the short-lived member Fernando Abrantes, who was, I think, largely chosen because he looked quite a lot like Karl Bartos. Fernando was in the band for 10 shows on the UK tour in July 1991. He wasn't quite as repressed as the rest of the group. He danced around a lot. He did 10 shows and then he was fired, presumably for enjoying himself too much on stage. Since then, Fernando has made a career out of being a former member of Kraftwerk. He released an album, I think called The Mix 2.0. He did a single, which was basically based upon the live solos he played during Music Non-Stop. I've heard them. They're not very good. They're not my type of music at all. So I think they made the right call there. Probably a lovely man. I don't know. They're Florian Bott, Ralph Bott, and there's Ralph using an old-fashioned floppy disk. So perhaps not quite as digital as we would have thought. Almost all of that technology is now obsolete. They did release another single. This is Radioactivity. This version is an American 12-inch single of Radioactivity. It contains 4 versions of the song. It contains a mix called the William Orbit Hardcore Mix, which you cannot get anywhere else, which was interesting, I think, being a fan. There's also a CD single that contains 3 remixes of the song by William Orbit and Francis Kavakian. I went a bit quiet after then. Kraftwerk didn't do very much for quite some time. They toured the Mix album in 1991. They changed their lineup. So Fernando left. He was replaced by Henning Schmitz, who I mentioned previously. Henning joined the group promoted from within, and was obviously an engineer on records going back as far as the Man Machine in 1978. And he joined the group, and he's still a member of the group now. So the four-piece lineup of the band that we have now is Fritz Hilpert, we have Henning Schmidt, we have Ralf Hutter, and we have Florian. And Florian doesn't like touring. So, what happens after that? Well, the band play live. And the band play live quite a lot. Probably the next best thing that they do is they play Leicester on the 18th of June 1992, which was before they were due to play a show supporting U2, which was their first ever support slot for something like 25 years. And I saw them in Leicester in 1992. I was almost a Kraftwerk virgin. I didn't know anything about the band really, apart from that they were German and they played, dancey bleepy bloop music. The tickets were £8.50. The room was about 800 people in capacity. They had sold probably something about 300, 400 tickets. It was only advertised locally. It was only because it was at the Polytechnic, which I was attending at the time, that I knew that show was happening. So I paid my £8.50. I saw Kraftwerk. I didn't really know most of the songs. They opened with the Robots, and all the walls turned to glass, and the world went from black and white to colour very, very quickly. And I was like, very simply, my life changed. I went into that show quite liking music with computers, and I came out of it loving music with computers. And also, I think that was there was a crowd surfer during Pocket Calculator. Florian was very surprised by that, and it was just staggeringly good. And if you haven't experienced Kraftwerk live, also bear in mind, fully standing venue. It was basically a club atmosphere. The shows now are much more relaxed, very much more staid, much more repressed, much more around visuals and watching a moving art show. That gig was basically like a rave with Kraftwerk playing to 300 people, and it was the more I think about it, the more I realize it was one of the most formative experiences that I've had in terms of seeing bands. The next time I saw Kraftwerk was 1997, Tribal Gathering in Luton, May the 25th. Allegedly the best show they ever played. I have the bootleg CD, and the bootleg CD, like the vinyl edition, runs 4% slow. The BBC were instructed to play the show back slower, so to reduce the chances of bootlegging. Fat chance of that. But they played a 2-hour show. It was their first show in 4 years. It was brilliant. They played 3 new songs that still haven't been released and probably will never be released. Those songs are called... they played 1 new song, actually, at Luton. That song was called Tribal. It was an instrumental banger, I think, is the technical way of describing it. They played a couple of other shows. This is a bootleg CD from one of them. This one was recorded at, I think, Linz in 1997. And the other 2 songs were called Tango and Lichthof. If you can find them, great. Nothing bad about them. They're just B-sidey type stuff. Clearly not up to the standards that you would expect. And at that point, it had been 11 years since Kraftwerk had released any new material, so people were starting to think that the band had become a touring museum to a future that had never happened. And that's broadly absolutely correct. To tie in with the Luton show and their return to live performance, 4 promo 12 inches were released. This is one of them. This is Trans-Europe Express, contains a unique edit of the LP version, and Music Non-Stop, which contains the 12-inch mix of the track. This one, obviously, I got second hand. It's got, as you can probably see, a couple of bits and bobs on there, but they're still expensive and hard to find. And the year 2000 came, and the band released Expo 2000 as the first new material in 14 years, and the first new material by both Fritz and Henning. So even though Karl Bartos wasn't credited on the mix in 1991, he had a substantial role in arranging the programming of those songs. This was the first post-Karl Bartos material the band had released in something like 16, 17 years. Originally, Expo 2000, this is a promo version of it with a slightly different track listing and some different mixes. The promo, Expo 2000 was about 14-second jingle that the band were paid €400,000 to write for an expedition. an expo which was happening in Germany, and they were probably identified as, you know, the premier German musical export, and paid handsomely to write a 14-second song. If anybody wants to pay me €400,000 to write a 14-second song, guys, say something to me in the comments, okay? I will do it for less, €300,000, okay? So this was released as 2 CD singles. This one is all full of Kraftwerk mixes, and this is a bunch of extra remixes, including things like the Underground Resistance mix, DJ Rolando mix, frankly quite dated now, very much of their time, and their time is probably about 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning, yeah, on a Saturday night in Detroit in February 2000. The band were quiet, and they continued to tour, and then they announced the release of Tour de France 2003 as a single, which was a similar kind of theme to the previous Tour de France, but it was a completely new track that just revisited the themes, and it was, yeah, to all intents and purposes, a completely different song with the same name. They then released Tour de France soundtracks. Now, the reason it's called soundtracks, no idea why. This is the 2004 remaster, by the way, and this is the 2003 CD. I've changed the cover because I really like the imagery on that. The only change that there was between the 2003 version of this album and the 2009 remaster is that the word soundtracks was taken out. Aside from that, it's identical, just been remastered. It's a great album. It's aged very well. It doesn't sound as unique as the other ones. The band are all using software now. They're running off laptop rigs. They're not running off any keyboards whatsoever. It's all replicated inside a machine. It's probably the ultimate extension of their ethos, but it doesn't sound as unique. You know, Kraftwerk had predicted the future for so long, and then the future had caught up with them. And where do you go once the future's caught up with you? Yeah, what do you do? Where do you go? I don't know. So, 2020 coloured vinyl version of Tour de France. Doesn't matter which one you get. This is the same album everywhere in the world. The same audio, the same songs, the same imagery, the same everything. And it's a really nice package, though, the coloured vinyl. It comes in both blue. Look at that, lovely blue. And it comes in a deep and lovely red, which, alongside the white of the sleeves, reflects the 3 colours of the French flag and the Tour de France imagery. The booklet is exactly the same as every other version of this that you will have seen. It's video grabs, imagery from the Tour de France, some lyrics. There's no point remastering an album 6 years after it originally came out. It's just to make sure that this version matched up with and was regarded as the same as the rest of the band's body of work, all mastered at the same time by the same ears, signed off by the same people, yada yada yada, and so on and so forth. So the last single of Kraftwerk original material that has been released to date is Aerodynamique, which is 12-inch single here. Has a couple of remixes by Francis Kabakian and Alex Gopher. The A-side is a remix by Kraftwerk themselves, so still keeping their hands on top of things. There's a CD single version of it, and around this time CD bootlegs really took off. So here's Tokyo, and another show from Tokyo with exactly the same track listing. This is a CDR of the Royal Festival Hall show on the 18th of March 2004. I was front row for that show, in between Florian and Fritz, and I wish I remembered it better, but it was incredible to watch them work. It really was. It was like seeing the Beatles and I was the nearest person to Fritz and Florian in the venue that night, which was an incredible experience. This is another bootleg. This is the Coachella Festival. Because the band brought their own PA to Coachella, sounds immaculate. This is as good as any live album I have heard. But you didn't need that, because the band released their own live album Minimum Maximum in 2005 on the basis of the 2004 tour. There's a couple of the shows here on the back. You can probably see Brixton and the Royal Festival Hall. Those shows were recorded. I was at those too, so I've been at the recording of a Kraftwerk live album. That's good for my ego. And there's also a very, very nice box set version of Minimum Maximum if you can find it. It features, hang on a second, a flip top lid that opens up. It's like this. Picture of the band. There's a card. There's a book. There's, you know, and the book features. Hang on a second. Tell this is, you know, lots and lots of photographs from the live show presented sequentially. Effectively a very expensive tour program. And then the last single that they released, certainly during Florian Schneider's tenure with the band, was a remix of Aerodynamique and La Forme by the various members of Hot Chip. It's an interesting diversion. It's not absolutely essential. It's also contained on this CD single. It's, you know, well worth getting and finding. I have 2.5 minutes, so I'll be short but sweet. The last thing the band have released so far is this. It is Kraftwerk 3D, the catalogue. It is re-recordings of all of their material from the 8 albums that they've recorded. So there's 8 CDs on here featuring every single song presented in new, reimagined, remixed, re-recorded versions, all the way through from Autobahn through to Tour de France. And it's also available as an 8-album box set. It's extremely nice. It weighs approximately 20,000 tons, but it's a gorgeous presentation of the 8 albums. Each one is presented around a set of themes with the 4 images of the band members. That one's Tour de France, for example. It is well worth getting. And the final thing which I will bring up is here, the 3D Catalogue Blu-ray box set, which contains 4 Blu-rays, 2 of concert material and recordings, 2 of just the animated films that the bands have been using, alongside the re-recorded versions of the songs which have been recorded over the live shows, where they've played 8 shows in a row at each venue, mostly art museums, places like that. And then they've recorded those and they've chosen the best performances. Hopefully this has been a useful, not too boring tour through what I regard to be the Techno Beatles, a band that completely changed the shape of music. If you don't know what they sound like, please listen to them. And if you do know what they sound like, you also know how much they've influenced everybody else over the years. I'm going to draw this to a close now. Thanks for your time. I will do this again at some point. But I'm definitely going for a big sleep now, because I have been monologuing more than Donald Sutherland in the middle of JFK, and I feel like I just need to sit down and to eat some sweets. Thank you very much. Please comment in the comments box, and we'll meet again. Thank you. Bye.